Thanks so much, Anne. Hi, everyone. My name is Becca Kelly. I'm super excited to be here. I am currently a talent acquisition specialist at Wistia, focusing on helping build our product and design teams over there. And previously, I was at another Boston startup called EverQuote, kind of an online insurance marketplace. So yeah, I'm super excited to chat a little bit today. I feel like it's always a very timely conversation about messaging into the abyss and trying to, get your message to stand out when candidates probably have 16 in-mails coming at them per day. So excited to dive into this, and I'll pass it over to the panelists to introduce themselves.
Thanks, Becca. My name is David Chang, angel investor, entrepreneur. I recently joined an early stage startup called Hunt Club. My quick background is having been an operator at 6 different Boston area early stage companies, both on the recruiting side as well as the candidate side. And I'm excited about this topic because I think there's so much that we can do together to engage with talent much more deeply. And the quick thing from my perspective is that I think it's always very difficult if you're a candidate in this particular sort of job market. There are so many options, even though there's this sort of doom and gloom in the economy, in the news right now, there are actually so many great companies. And so excited to talk about how companies can engage with those candidates.
Super. Hi, I'm Lindsay Simpson. I'm the VP of Talent Acquisition at Starry. We're an internet service provider. Prior to leading talent at Starry, I worked at a B2B health tech startup. So just love the startup community, really excited to be a part of the discussions today and hopefully learn from all of you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carly. I am currently a talent brand program manager at GitLab. So GitLab is a later stage startup. We actually IPO'd last October, which was super exciting. And I've been looking after the employer brand components of GitLab for the past year. So it's been a very exciting time for me. We are a fully remote distributed team. We're across 65 countries. I am currently actually in Cairo, Egypt. I'm visiting my sister, so I apologize ahead of time if my Wi-Fi comes in and out. I'm usually located in Houston, Texas, temporarily from Boston, so I'm kind of living what we speak here at GitLab, which is supporting everyone kind of from wherever they're coming in. So I'm super excited to talk about this topic. I think it's super relevant also from an employer branding perspective, something that with the current market and things like that, just looking at how can you be the loudest voice in the room when it comes to in-mailing or getting your message across to the right candidate. So I'm super, super excited to be talking about this with you all today.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So just to expectation set a little bit, I have some questions for you all. Also in the chat, if you want to add in your answers, just to get a sense of, who we're talking to today. And then we will move into some questions just, around candidate outreach, employer brand, how those two play together. And yeah, so to start us off really quick, can I get a raise of hands or some commotion in the chat if you are a team of 5 or fewer? Oh, sorry. I got ahead of myself. If you're on a talent team in your current role, can I get a raise of hands? Talent? All right. Can I see if anyone's on an employer branding team? And marketing? Nice. And then other. Cool. Interesting. I'm really curious to see what those others are. And yeah, so team of 5 or fewer. Can I see those hands again? Awesome. 10 or fewer? 20 or fewer? Okay. Oh, okay. We got a couple. Cool. So yeah, so appreciate that. Just helps to kind of understand, like I said, who we're chatting with. So to start us off, what kind of over the last 3 years, what has been different about the challenge of appealing to candidates, and kind of how, like I said, how it's changed over the last 3 years?
Yeah, maybe I can start out. I guess I can do that since I can physically claim the mic. I think the biggest thing that's changed over the last 3 years has been the velocity that candidates are, like how long it takes for a candidate to find a role. We have some numbers ourselves, and hopefully I'm not going to butcher them, but we had some numbers where the typical candidate 3 years ago in 2019, when they were looking for a job, it took them 120 days was the typical process. And last year, actually early this year, it shortened about 70 days. And so that's a big tightening, right? And so a really big difference there. The number of offers that they had on average, I think it was around like 1.7 about 3 years ago. And now it's closer to like 2.8, which is amazing, right? And then the final one I'll throw out there is that because there was competition for that same talent, that the candidate was able to negotiate for higher salaries. And this is the number that I need to make sure I get right. But they were able to negotiate, I think it was something like 8 or 9% 3 years ago. And now with all the competition for limited talent, they were able to increase their salaries by about 20 to 30%. And so that's a huge change in this short period of time.
That's great, David.
Oh, sorry, Lindsay, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think just on the heels of that, I think, kind of an interesting opportunity we all have is the realities of the marketplace being so competitive that people aren't limited by their geography anymore. And I think that's a really, really awesome thing. And, it creates an opportunity for companies to really communicate, what their products are, what their culture are. And it's no longer just within the walls of your offices. So for Starry, we're just in the US today, but we have 6 different markets and we have real opportunity to share that. So I think it's actually a great challenge that we do have in such a competitive marketplace, that there are so many opportunities. And a few years ago, it was, significantly limited by the geography that we have. So Carly is an example of that, just where she is today. So I'd love to hear from you all as well on this topic.
Yes, and just kind of piggybacking off of that too, Lindsay, I think from an employer brand perspective, absolutely, I totally agree with you. It's the location and regionality of it. I see it, I mean, literally from where I'm sitting today too, I'm seeing how different the culture is here, and kind of the reach and the strategies and things that I would use in my home turf don't necessarily translate. And that's where I really look kind of how remote has really impacted so much more than just an employer brand perspective. It's everything from access to roles, access to even individuals online too. I mean, I know in-mails going and coming have increased profoundly too over the last 3 years. So it's definitely something that I've seen from COVID itself, and kind of where we're headed now from the hybrid versus remote versus fully in person too. I think that's been a huge topic in regards to just hiring and recruitment and kind of the whole process.
Awesome. Thanks, Carly. Thanks, Lindsay. And so obviously the first step to, breaking into that talent market and, getting this competitive kind of landscape, you want to personalize your messages. You want to show these candidates that, you're looking at their profiles. You're not just someone who is sending out bulk LinkedIn in-mail messages. So what does personalization look like in messages, and how does it differ for different segments of candidate pools?
Yeah, and then maybe I'll draw some other broad examples from previous experiences. And so my previous company, we were selling to the HR space, and the decision maker was someone that was in HR and an employer. And what we found was that frequently, depending on the industry, depending on the level of seniority, that we would have to customize our messages and basically fish in different ponds, right? And so there were a handful of candidates that we found like were much more engaged with referral type networks, right? And they wanted someone who knew someone at the company. There were others that were really good at leveraging existing resources, whether like job boards. And so that messaging would also have to be a little different. And then there was a whole class of candidate that we were trying to reach that was super difficult to reach via any of the social networks. And so we found that, it's not that you want to text people, but like even like the channel itself really depends on the level of the candidate. And I had a little bit of a shocker at one company where I was asking someone like, well, how do you engage with someone? Like, where do you record your contact info? And they said they don't use any apps. And so for them, they weren't using email. They were just expecting that an employer would actually reach them on a social network, which was kind of shocking, right? Like, reach me on WhatsApp. Like, okay, right? That's a little surprising. And you know, that's not where I would be looking for a job, but for them, it really mattered.
Yeah, absolutely. Lindsay?
I think just managing those expectations up front as well, and trying to understand what mediums of communication people are comfortable with, and really establishing that early on. It's a personal thing for some people. They appreciate the efficiencies of maybe a WhatsApp or a text message, but some people actually might be surprised or not expecting that. So I think it's just in your early conversations, asking people, how do you like to communicate best? And, generally, how do you like to connect? I think can go a long way. And it does go with really making it personal out of the gate. I think some of the things that we look towards, kind of a North Star for our TA team, is just making sure every experience is really human and meaningful, and everything that we do with intent. And it starts from that first conversation. So we kick things off with people. The most simple question, but I think it's the most impactful, is what's important to you? And that really drives the rest of the conversation, because it is bi-directional, and we can really navigate the conversation in a much more meaningful way by starting with that. The other thing we always do ask is, what is the cadence of communication that's going to work with you? What's the best way to reach you, so we can stay in touch about your job search, maybe what you're exploring elsewhere, and how can we make sure that we're creating a great experience with you here, regardless if you get to a final round to get an offer and say yes, or you go somewhere else. We want to make sure that you feel thanked and that your time is recognized, as well as we're learning as much about you as you're learning about us. So we just try to level set that really early on.
Yeah, absolutely, Lindsay. I couldn't agree more with what both you and David are saying. I think too, from like an employer brand perspective, something I always think about is personalization. As we're saying, it can look like, from an engineer to a salesperson to someone in GNA as well. That's something I'm struggling with even to this day, is what is speaking to these candidates specifically? Is it a video ad? Is it a blog? Is it an actual one-on-one conversation with someone from those teams instead of our recruitment team? So that is something we're working through too at GitLab. And one thing that we do to kind of work through that is we actually provide on our LinkedIn recruitment application, we actually provide kind of anyone in the company who wants access to be where the recruiter had actually be emailing and sourcing. They can do it on their own, because we see that candidates really do respond very well to hiring managers and people who are on the team who look and sound like them. And as I'm saying too, from a global perspective, it's great to have individuals from different regions kind of reaching out to those regions as well. So we see the likeness also in emails working very, very well from the recruitment perspective, and also in the employer brand content, obviously, too, working through what makes the most sense depending on the candidate's profile and background, and what's going to be the loudest email in their inbox in LinkedIn. So
yeah, that's great. And Lindsay, I really love the leading with what's important to you question right off the bat. I really, really like that. Lindsay, you kind of touched on this a little bit, and I'm curious to see if David or Carly might have a little bit kind of more light to shed on this as well, or Lindsay, if you can even elaborate a little bit more. But what can teams do to continue that personalization throughout the entire recruitment process?
Sure. I'll just add, I would say, just be present wherever you are. Choose to be there truly. There's so many things that can distract us in our day-to-day. There's so many channels of communication that are wonderful. Slack, I'm a huge fan of Slack, but when I'm in a conversation with a candidate, I'm really trying to shut things off. So if I'm on a phone call or on a video chat, I'm really trying to make sure that those notifications are off, so I can truly be present with the person and just listen and really make that investment of time. I know it sounds like a small thing, but it's also something that we coach our teams on as well. If you're in a one-on-one or you're in a group meeting, just make sure to prepare yourself and really be present for it. So I think that that's one thing that you can do throughout the whole candidate journey, is making sure that you're truly there.
Yeah, and I'll throw in one other piece to it. I think whether you're on the talent acquisition side or if you're at the company, to just make sure you have a consistent message that you're sharing with folks. And so for most talent, most candidates that are pretty desirable, they're talking to multiple people at the company, right? And then have had some bad experiences on both sides of the table where that message wasn't really clear. And so it would be like the candidate would get a different answer from the hiring manager and a different one from the talent acquisition person, a different answer from the buddy that she knows over there. And so just make sure that you are employing the entire company as a consistent whole.
David, also just to, sorry, I keep jumping in, to piggyback off of also what David just said too. I think something I always think about is ensuring that, and Lindsay, you mentioned this too, is ensuring that your messaging is consistent throughout the whole process. So I partner with our onboarding team, I partner with our recruiters, I partner with even the hiring teams too, to ensure that the messaging that candidates are seeing before they even know the brand or know what it's like to work at your company aligns with the experience they get through the recruitment process, which then aligns with the onboarding, and it aligns with the 6-month check-in, the year check-in, and even to the day that they actually leave the company. You want to ensure that that whole messaging, the whole process, and that's done really through, I think, the partnership that teams are actually putting front and making sure that they're talking and they're sharing and they're ideating together and ensuring that what they're actually telling aligns with kind of that next step in the process too.
Yeah, absolutely. And Carly, this next question is a little bit definitely more up your alley, but again, would love kind of input from David and Lindsay's point of view. But taking kind of a step back for folks who might not be as familiar with kind of what employer brand is and what that entails, and why it's so important, in reaching out to candidates and kind of having that sense of employer brand. Can you tell us a little bit about just kind of high level, what is employer brand? And then also, how does that connect into the company brand? And why is that important in the recruiting process?
Absolutely. I get this question all the time too. And this is one that, funny thing about me too, I've been in employer brand for about, I would say like 3 to 4-ish years. And it's something that, to be honest, my manager 3 years ago trusted me to jump into it and start looking over it at my last company, Rapid7, who's a Boston local organization. And she trusted me and we partnered together. And my first incognito Google search was, what is employer brand? Because truthfully, it was something I had never heard of. And it was something that I knew I was creative and I loved it. And I had been dabbling in it previously. But what I found over the last 3 years, employer brand is super simple. Basically, you can look at it as your customers are candidates instead of the organization's customers. So the messaging, you're a mini marketing team. And I say that I'm kind of a mini marketing team of one at GitLab, where I'm building, whether it's content or messaging or internal engagement, working with our internal comms team to ensure that you're supporting your team members. Your team members are your best advocates, and you want to be ensuring that you're providing them that platform to kind of share out with the market what it's like to work at your organization. So I look at talent brand, really, it's a mini marketing team, just with a different kind of with a different target audience. And you can segment that the same way, however you wish, kind of partnering really closely with your actual marketing team. And so something that I'm still learning this, and I'm still kind of working through this too, but from a company perspective, there's so many things that they can do kind of to work through this and to engage, whether talent brand is something that is brand new to your organization. It's probably always been there. You just didn't actually put a name or a person to that specific role. I know that there's recruitment teams and kind of everyone wears so many hats. I still do too. So it's something that a lot of people share, but like I mentioned before too, something that anyone can do, and everyone in this room can start doing this today, is you are your best advocate for your company. And the best thing that employer branders can do is provide enablement, whether that's training, just giving you kind of quick accesses. At GitLab, we use Bamboo, which is the social sharing platform. We can actually put in links, we can put in copy for you to just quickly repost onto your own social channels. Because again, it's tenfold when you have your own team members advocating and kind of showcasing what it's like behind the scenes of that organization. You're going to reach so many more people and so many more regions, different departments, different languages. And so that's really where I recommend to start from an employer brand perspective, is with your own best advocates, which are your people. And there's so many layers to it. I could go on for hours for this. I definitely want to let Lindsay and David too have a point too in this, but.
I have nothing to share other than that's pretty cool that you did the Google search on that. And thanks for sharing that.
I think it's just so nuanced. I think in a really, I guess, simplified way. I've never focused in on brand. I'm definitely not an expert on it for sure, but I can tell you, I think something I heard recently really, really resonated in me about a brand just in general is I've heard it's a set of commitments, and you can either fulfill those or you don't. And for candidates, I feel like there's a real commitment to a candidate experience and creating that for your people. And I know for our team, like, I want to be known as the brand that delivers that happy interviewing experience for the marketplace. Our company delivers happy interneting. As a candidate, I want to make sure it's a great experience for you. So I think that when we think of our brand, I want people to think about that delightful experience. I want people to look forward to interviewing and exploring opportunities with us. And how can we create that for every single person, if it's their first job out of school, or if this may be their fifth organization. So I kind of just boil it down to that set of commitments, and we do our really best to deliver against those and make sure that we stay in step with what's current for us and what's aspirational. And I think in talent, I know I'm definitely guilty of this. I get really behind something I won't do is represent something I don't believe in. So wherever you see me, just know I'm 125% what I'm doing and saying here. That being said, you can sometimes get really excited about the aspirational vision you may have of your own team, how you work, what the opportunities are. So I think continually balancing that with what is current and where you're hoping to go is really, really important, both from a brand perspective, but also, even just kind of day to day, role by role.
Yeah, that's great. And Carly, again, kind of a little bit more pointed towards you, staying on the employer brand theme. Is there any advice that you would give to recruiters to incorporate company brand into the personalization of their outreach?
Absolutely. I think I kind of touched on this a little bit in the beginning, but it's definitely, this is a tricky question. This is one my recruiters, I feel like a consultant sometimes because I'm constantly like, I don't have time to answer your questions. Let's just set up a session kind of to talk through it from a wider lens. But recruiter to recruiter, it definitely differs, like I mentioned before, whether you're sales, whether you're even early sales, BDRs, SDRs to an account executive, it's going to be a very different message and a very different experience for that candidate. Same with engineering, from product team to UX, very different experience again there too. And even tenure and careers, it's a totally different target audience. And that's when I speak to segmenting your audience is really key. There's a lot of obviously marketing principles when it comes to talent brand. So you need to keep those in mind. I think when you're building your strategy, every strategy I kind of start really, really broad with, first of all, you need to kind of build your pillars and your key message. And this doesn't have to be hard set in stone, but it's something I like to think of that you base it off of your company mission and your core values. And if you start from there, you can't go wrong because the company already has that in place. It's already been approved and agreed on. So from an employer branding team, you can kind of take that and turn it into something that, again, is targeting more of your target audience, which is those candidates. So from there, you can break it down and do your own little incognito Google searches of looking at, well, what do engineers, where do they live? What are they really interested in? And where can we equip our recruiters with the types of messaging and the content, whether that's engineers, they don't really want to watch a video. They would rather read about it. And whereas salespeople, they want to see a quick hitting video that's going to really speak to them, that's going to talk about maybe the company performance or the revenue or kind of the hard numbers. And that's going to really engage and interest them. So that might be a video of the hiring manager talking about that and the types of people that they want on their team. And so it differs, and there's no right or wrong or yes or no answer. And again, I know I've been in talent brand for a short time, but it's something I'm learning that there's not going to be a perfect way or a perfect response you can provide to your recruiter. And I look at this as I equip my recruiters with all things and everything, because after all, they're the ones on the ground. They have the best knowledge about what's going to work and what's going to resonate with their audience and their candidates. So we actually at GitLab have a it's a public facing. You can check it out today if you go onto our GitLab public handbook. We document all of our processes and things. And so on there, I have a repository of all of the content that basically I publish from a talent brand perspective, whether it's awards, videos, articles, features, things like that, that I share with the recruiters how to use it. And then I kind of set them free with how to use it to their advantage. So again, another topic I could go on for hours for, but it's a hot topic, and it's something that we're working through still at GitLab, and I'm sure most companies are too. So.
Yeah, thanks so much, Carly. David or Lindsay, do you have any insight to how you have personally added, whether it's an employer brand or, kind of personalize that outreach to be like, hey, this is who we are. This is, these are our values. This is why we think you might be a good fit. Do you have any extra insight to share on that, or?
I would just say I talked with my colleagues who are in these roles, what drew them into the organization, what really resonated with them, where did they find us? I know it doesn't sound super nuanced, but I think having a conversation of what really excited them, what are some interesting things they're working on, and how can I really convey that to the marketplace, and just partnering with them. Our talent acquisition team is our talent partners to the business and trying to meet the growth goals that we have. And what we can't replace is our people. And they are really what bring our values, our vision, our mission to life. So it's just spending time with them and understanding what the actual experience is of our employees, and just learning from them as well. So I think if you have a great partnership and you have some people that are really strong proponents of your brand and are having a great experience, go and talk with them. And just make sure that you get at the heart of it. So I completely agree with what Carly said. I think it's just really nuanced, especially when there's a wide range of opportunities you're representing to a marketplace. It's a wonderful thing. It's so much of the reason I joined Starry, but it also creates a different set of challenges and opportunity for you to really understand what's going to draw people in different roles.
Very cool. And I guess the only other thing I'll add is I really like the perspective of putting the marketing lens on this as opposed to just the acquisition side, right? And so I've seen a lot of messaging through other companies where the outreach looks a little bit more like overly focused on the opportunity itself. And so we're looking for this kind of person that has certain background, and et cetera. And what it looks like from the candidate perspective is that it's not particularly exciting, right? And it's like you almost want to write this like as a teaser. And so from their perspective, what'll get them to lean in on like what's special about the company and make it super tight, right? And so it's like one sentence of why it's worth following up or making that first phone call or returning that first email. And so, just whittle it down to that essence.
Yeah, absolutely. And David, you made a good point there about kind of at a macro level, it's more about like general marketing. And it wasn't necessarily on my list, but it did jog my memory of kind of what we had talked about at one point is curious if you or if you or Lindsay or Carly, how can recruitment teams or whoever work with marketing to kind of strategize, whether it's personalization or getting company brand across? How can kind of marketing and talent work hand in hand?
I can definitely jump in here. I think that's such a great question. It's something that I'm constantly, every company I join, it's actually one of the first questions that I ask is, what is the marketing team structure? What does it look like? And are they open to having someone who's not going to be on their team, asking them for design help, asking them for video production help, for blog writing help? What is that partnership going to look like for me? And it's so key to have marketing teams that are open to learning and to understanding that talent brand is so important. It's important to company success and growth to have a successful sales team in place and a successful engineering team building the product, leading to the bottom line of the company. It all starts with talent brand and having that message locked down and getting in front of the right people. So if you can actually eloquently provide that insight and knowledge to a marketing team who's open to hearing it and wants to understand and work with you, you are setting yourself up for success as a talent brander. You're setting yourself up for success in recruitment, and just kind of like everything falls down under that. So I wouldn't know necessarily how to do it if I had a marketing team that wasn't open to this. So I might not be giving the best advice if you're in that spot right now. But definitely if you're looking at kind of building a relationship like that, I would just start with sitting down and having a really honest conversation with your marketing team, whether you're in recruitment or you are a talent branding person, to say, here are my goals and objectives, here are how they align with yours and the bottom lines of the company, and here's how we meet in the middle and we can work together. Because again, you are a mini marketing team, you're using the same principles and things, it's just kind of a different target audience.
Lindsay, anything to add? Or
I think Carly totally nailed that one.
I will also add my just a little anecdote. Wistia, for those of you who are not familiar, is a video marketing software company. So we help businesses grow their business using video. And we had our marketing team, and we have a dedicated video team. So it's a little bit different, especially if you're, a team or at a company with those pretty limited resources. But they created a basically recruitment specialized video for us that lives on our career pages. And the number of times I've talked with candidates on the phone where they were like, hey, I went and checked out, the job post on your website and I watched that video and it was really great. And I think just even small things like that kind of sets that tone of, that's right in line with our employer brand. That's right in line with our company brand. It's fun, it's engaging, it's light. And so I also agree heavily on, getting marketing involved if they are open to it, and just kind of, showing them the value in, hey, this is why we should partner on this together, because the benefits can really be great. So this is my last question before we turn it over to the audience for any questions. And I'm really excited about this one because I think this has been really kind of apparent, especially over the last 3 years or so. So it was pretty obvious that Gen Zers and younger millennials were starting to kind of change the landscape of expectations in terms of, a workforce, a recruitment process, benefits, everything like that. And I think the pandemic really just kind of really sped that up. And I think all of a sudden, everyone has this kind of fresh set of expectations. So what do you think that will all look like in the long term in terms of those expectations?
Yeah, maybe the first comment that I'll make on that is that there are definitely different expectations that different generations have, right? There's largely driven by their peers. And I think a lot of what we see is that most people's networks tend to be fairly horizontal, right? So you tend to know people who are like you, tend to know people who are from the same area, tend to know people who are in the same industry, tend to have the same, like if you have a functional background, all that is sort of the same. So like my visualization of this is sort of like, if we were in an elevator, like every floor has different people that typically get on and off that floor. And so what we found is for a handful of employers that were trying to engage with that next generation, that it was very difficult for them to even find that, right? And so I'm referring to like warm connections. And so if you're trying to reach out cold into a new segment, it's really difficult to meet them unless you have other people that are there. And so I think that over time, as more people who are coming from either that market segment or that age segment or that demographic, that they'll be able to, from the inside, change how you're messaging, right? And so I find that conversations between acquisition and potential candidates, they frequently sort of hit a wall when you can't talk shop anymore. And so I think that is really important. And whether they're on the team themselves or if you're just like, very tightly partnered with other groups within the company, I think it's just really important to do, especially for this next generation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to jump in after that too, something unique about GitLab that we're actually working through is we're fully remote, we're fully distributed. We have no office spaces anywhere to kind of do hands-on training for individuals coming right out of college or even career shifting or really just learning how to work in a corporation. And it's something we're actively working on too with kind of building not only the onboarding experience, but also the learning and development experience as well. So it's a really big challenge from a remote perspective, because it's something that you need to be able to not only train these individuals on how to work at a company, what it means to sign an email and not sound passive aggressive, or even how to read into an email and really understand like what's being asked of you, or how to respond adequately and professionally, and just how to conduct yourself in a corporate setting. So that is something and I'm sure a lot of other remote companies are feeling this too, is how do you build a program that speaks to these individuals too and resonates with them? Like David, what you said, I totally agree with. I think there's just different ways to kind of communicate and things they value, and ways that they're being kind of brought into organizations as well. So it's definitely something to think about and to work through. Also is just ensuring that anything you're putting in place, yes, it speaks to the tenured individual, but it also speaks to kind of the person coming right out of college too, who needs to learn these basic principles. So
I'll just add that, yeah, I think I love that you brought in onboarding and just communication, just making sure your message lands with a broad audience. And hopefully for growth stage companies and for all of us here, continual, growing organizations, that we can continue to have this challenge. And I think it's also realizing this work is never done. You can always, look back and, appreciate all that's gone in, but continue to learn from it, and to change maybe the way that you communicate or what you're saying if it isn't landing, and to really kind of hone in. I know for us, one of our values at Starry is delivering for the customer and delivering, with integrity. So we're a very customer first organization, and that same level of devotion that we have for our customers, we bring for our employees as well. And so how can we, make sure that we're continuing to deliver that for our people as an hopefully ever growing organization? And our workforce is distributed. We have office first, we have hybrid, we have remote. And I think it's continually a challenge to both create that experience and making sure that you're making incremental investments for it. Something I've definitely learned in my time here is you're not always going to be able to reinvent the wheel, but really appreciate and understand what's been built and try to make incremental improvements towards where you want to go. It may not always be just building from the ground up. Really value what's been built and the institutional knowledge that surrounds you, and embrace all the new people and perspectives that join, because you can make something really, really beautiful from that.
Yeah, that's great. And I think I might have lied. I think I have one more question, because I do want to make sure that, this is Startup Week Boston. And I recognize that, a lot of folks in here and a lot of folks joining us online and virtually, maybe they don't even have a marketing team yet. Maybe they are, it's the CEO, it's, 3 devs, and, you're going and you're trying to build something. For a team of truly, one talent person, or, even less than 5, before we kind of end this and pass it over to the audience, my last question, and I promise this time, what do you think is, if you were to just kind of close this out with like the key piece of, what they should be bringing with them, after this session, for, like I said, that team of one that really doesn't have a marketing department, or, these strong partners, what's kind of that either number one piece of advice, or just kind of where to start with that?
I can jump in on this one, because I have been in this place, and I'm not there completely anymore. I do have a manager who's amazing and really steps in. But I think something I learned very early on in my career was you need to be comfortable asking for help and saying that either you don't know the answer, you don't have the capacity, or you just need more hands on deck. It's something I'm still learning how to get comfortable with, asking for help, and relying on team members who might be just better at kind of what you're asking to do or looking to do. So I rely heavily on my recruiters. I, again, rely heavily even on the team members, internal, all of the employees at GitLab. I really look at them as, I give them the microphone, I'll give them the platform and the skills that they need to step up and be my advocate, or the company's advocate. So I think that's like the golden piece of advice I wish I had coming out of college too, is it's okay not to have capacity. It's okay not to know everything. it is okay to ask for help. So that's kind of what I guess I'll leave you all with, just from being my golden rule and my key piece of advice.
I think that's something I continue to learn, honestly, is knowing what you really can say yes to, and being okay with actually saying no, and realizing you're going to deliver on what you want to by being a lot more intentional. And collaboration, you will make a better product by asking for help and leaning on other people. And I would just say, I've been in, organization. I was the first recruiter in my past company, and I would just say, have a bias for action. Know what you know, ask for help. And you'll build it from there, but don't try to boil the ocean. Try to finish the one thing that matters. It can be quite fulfilling, and you can build onto it from there.
I guess I'll answer from the early stage startup standpoint. And I think the key thing you got to do in the early days is have like a really tight view of what your bullseye target candidate looks like, and go after them. And sometimes they'll be in your network, sometimes they won't be in your network. In the early days, you're going to largely find that the people that you trust and the people that you know are going to be available through like a very, very short hop. And so you might be like 1 or 2 degrees away from that person. And in those early days, when you're scrappy, you don't have a dedicated team, like you're doing that. And so leverage the heck out of your connections, find people that are connected to them, find connectors who are connectors themselves. And so it's a lot of the blocking and tackling and brute force just to get out there and find those candidates. And know that if you're at an early stage company that it's kind of trite to say, but people are everything. And so without talent, you really have nothing. A handful of the early stage companies that we work with have really prioritized talent acquisition as one of their first things. And so there was a tech company that I happen to personally back, but their third hire behind the 2 co-founders was a talent acquisition person. I was like, what about developers? Like, no, we need more good people. And so for them, that was their priority.
Yeah, that's great. And thank you for indulging me on that. I know that wasn't necessarily on the list, but yeah, so that is really all the questions. I want to make sure that we save some time for audience questions.
I'll start us off with one of the online questions. And actually, Becca, your last question was an online question. So that was clearly on other folks' minds.
Look at that.
But here's another one. I've seen tons of research stating that employees don't quit companies, they quit managers. Have you seen any research that shows employees join companies for managers? Wouldn't this be true? What can hiring managers do themselves to ensure a better candidate experience and increase the closing rate? A lot there.
I don't mind taking the first part of that, I guess. Employees joining maybe an organization to work with maybe a prior manager. I think that's just fellowship. I think that, if you can embody like authentic leadership and show up as who you are and human to your colleagues. I know I'm not a different person at home and at work. If I'm off in one place, it's generally the other as well. So I think something that, you see if somebody really connects with how you are and how you show up and your values, you may see somebody come and join your team again. I've had the good fortune to work with colleagues again that I worked in prior companies, and it's been a wonderful thing. And we've kind of navigated these different journeys together. So I don't always look at as, they're leaving your company, but maybe they're just kind of running towards something to build again together. And I think a great thing is if you were able to build an environment or a team where people really connected and did really good work, and they want to do it together again. I think that's a real win. So regardless if you're the company that somebody has left to join another organization, I wouldn't take that too personally. I'd kind of take that as you created a great place for people to connect and build something together, and they're wanting to do that again. So I do look for that, and I do look for, I'd say, for sure, in managers.
Just to go off of that, Lindsay, too, I think 2 things that we really look to do also at GitLab from a management perspective is I do agree with that comment too. And Lindsay, I totally support what you're saying. I think it's not one reason people necessarily leave an organization. And I think managers, they definitely obviously are a key component to whether someone is happy or stays or wants to leave or those kinds of feelings. But I think some things you can do also just as an organization is equipping your managers with trainings, different things that they can actually leverage to be the best manager that they can be. We've recently launched a program called MECC. It's managing so everyone can contribute. Everyone can contribute is a really big component of GitLab and one of our core values. And it's something that we live and breathe by, and we're training our managers on to ensure that they're comfortable managing a fully remote team across different time zones, whether people are logging into meetings or they're working async. It's something that a manager steps into a role. Maybe it's their first management role. So you need to really ensure that you're setting them up for success too, so that you aren't seeing the managers as being kind of the key reason maybe that team members are leaving. And then the other point too is just providing managers maybe with that LinkedIn recruiter seat to actually do some of the sourcing themselves.
Yeah, and I'll just throw in there the other aspect of this is that getting the band back together is a very, very powerful thing in startup land. And so I've seen at some of the most successful early stage companies that in the early days, the people that you recruit through warm referrals and internal just direct connections was north of 60 or 70% in the early days. It doesn't scale forever, right? At some point, you sort of have to then extend beyond that first degree network. But that jumpstart is really, really powerful in the early days. And because the question was more about like, what can managers do? I think I'll also throw out there, the reverse is also true, where I find that people join companies, sure, if they've had a previous manager and they've had a great experience and they go ahead and do that. But the flip is also true, right? And so regardless of your seniority, like whether you recruit someone to join the company, you're joining a company where your manager used to be, or like getting this strong group of people back together is one of the most powerful things that happens in early startup land. And so I think maybe the takeaway there is, if you don't have that direct network, find other people who will be talent magnets themselves, like talent magnet type operators. And that's something that anyone, whether you're early stage or late stage, those are all really powerful things that you can do.
So you guys have kind of touched on it slightly already. Obviously, personalization in messages is super important. How do you kind of balance out the fact that you're reaching enough quantity of people so that your pipeline is great enough that you find the right person in the end, but remain true to your brand voice and keep that personalization going in the messaging?
I can maybe jump in here first with this one. This is something, great question. It's something and I know I keep saying this, but we're also kind of working through that right now. I think it's something that you really need to look at. I know I mentioned this before too, and looking at your target audience and segmenting it too, and ensuring that you're really reaching those individuals with the right types of messaging. It's also kind of researching as well. I think you need to ensure that you're asking the individuals what they're looking for, whether they're in your company or even kind of just I recommend doing candid questions from your recruiters. They can kind of have a candid conversation with incoming candidates or talent to understand what worked for them, what didn't work for them too. And so I think to create a strategy that's really broad and reaching a wider audience, this is something we're actually trying to hone in because we are an open source organization. So we have a ton of our talent actually coming from that open source market. So I'm looking at how are we actually diversifying our talent pools and spreading out away kind of from that really honed in target audience. So I think it's important just to be seen in a lot of places. And that's, again, where those candid conversations come into place, which is, where did you hear about us? Where would you look for a role? Where do your friends look for roles? Or the number one person you would refer, how would they find us? So from a startup perspective, it's really all in those conversations and just enabling your recruiters to have those, but also being susceptible and open to the feedback that they're giving you and actioning that feedback. That is something I'm still working on too, is how are you taking that feedback in and really putting it into a plan?
Can moderators answer the question too? I struggle with that as well, because it is such a lift to, if you're personalizing every message and you're reaching out to hundreds of candidates, every week, it's like, how do you how do you make it known that, you're not just a robot who's reaching out to these people, but you're not, that's going to add so much time to every message. And it really starts to, you kind of struggle to find that balance. I think what is really important is, the personalization. It doesn't even need to be, like, hey, I saw you worked at this company and this company, and you listed that you did this during your tenure at this place. I think just like even crafting a message that shows them like, hey, I'm a human too. I really am looking at your profile. If they have the same name as you, I'll be like, hey, name twin, just add these small little pieces in that are like, hey, I really think you would be a good fit for this company. It doesn't necessarily need to be, pulling out every detail from their profile. But the personalization really is also just making you like personalizing yourself and making you sound more like a human and not just like, where a lot of people do care about, series funding and, all of those fun things that come with VC backed companies. But a lot of times people today also are looking for, am I going to be treated like a person at this company? Like, am I, I don't want to work 60 hours a week. I want to make sure that I'm going to have a life. And I think just finding ways to kind of make yourself more human in those messages really resonates with people when they're, getting so much reach out. It's kind of how do they sift through all of that noise?
That's so true. I love the human test, right? Like it's like the reverse of like the CAPTCHA, right? You're like, yes.
I think also to scale it too is just embedding metrics really early on into your organization, regardless of how small the team is. They can really tell the story. And if you can invest that time up front, I think it can make a really, really meaningful and outsized impact on your organization. So if you are a lean team, I know it's not uncommon for lean talent and people teams. But I think that if you can really understand what you're driving towards, what it's actually going to take, and get the resources that you need to get there, I think it will help you, exponentially along the way. So I can't say it enough, trying to introduce those into the metrics that are really going to matter and drive your business really, really early on, and to make sure that you can actually advocate for the support and resourcing that you need to deliver against the company goals is something that I certainly learned along the way and continue to learn. So that would be my advice to you there.
Another question. First of all, wanted to thank you all for the panel. It's been like really insightful. Coming from a marketing perspective, I find it super interesting what you're saying about like almost mimicking marketing and sales pipeline, but for talent acquisition. So going off some of the points that Lindsay just made about having metrics, like what metrics are important for you around like the pipeline? I know like for marketing, for example, is like number of visitors, then leads converted, then sales qualified leads that help us optimize for that. Do you guys have metrics as well?
Yeah, I love that question. Sorry, I love the reframing of that, which was around managing a pipeline, right? And so if any of you have a sales or marketing background or like understand like how to run a campaign, like use that methodology. And I think it depends on the company, right? Of your entire funnel, like figure out where the blockages are. Like sometimes the blockages, you can't get that initial message out there, and for whatever reason, maybe the company positioning is a little fuzzy. And so people are like, what exactly to do? Why should I listen? And so if your metric is like, to open rates and it's just really low, then figure out how to fix that first, right? And there's one part of it. I've seen a bunch of other blockages that are a little bit later on, which is the message is really honed in. People are clicking through, we're getting that first call, but for whatever reason, there's a massive drop-off rate between that very first conversation and then the subsequent step, whatever, maybe it's like a screen team or something else. And in that case, maybe your targeting is really off, that you're just fishing in the wrong places. And so I've seen that as well. And so, even though the message resonates, that if the conversion rate at some place in the middle of the funnel, it's like, let's just say it's like a 10% conversion rate, but you're expecting 30 and other places are 30, then you got to, change who's entering the funnel in the first place. And so I don't think there's a silver bullet other than iterating, doing it quickly, and just making sure that you're, to Lindsay's point, like have really, really good data around that and have it be data driven.
Just another quick point too, some of the hard metrics that I look at in employer branding too is we do use like website clicks on our careers page, how long they're on the page for. It's on just Google Analytics. We do run like a quick report to see, are they scrolling? What are they clicking on? Where are they hanging out on the page the longest? And we actively kind of are reshifting things. We just relaunched our careers page this past year, actually. So it's been a really big test too, that we put our own OKR against it, which is to actually increase site traffic by 10% quarter over quarter, which has driven us to look at how are people using this page? How can we make it better? And how can we kind of use that data that we're seeing to target them, I guess, better and provide a better experience for the individuals that are actually accessing it. And the other component, I mean, this is pretty simple too, but it's the social aspect in campaigns. If you're using like a paid campaign, like LinkedIn Paid Campaign Manager, or you're maybe partnering with the marketing team on paid campaigns on Google or something like that too. Obviously, there's just those hard metrics themselves are showing clicks, click-through rates, cost per click, things like that too. And then we tie that back into maybe you do a special link through Greenhouse that you only send out with that campaign, so you can actually see how many clicks you're getting or replies you're getting through that campaign itself. And landing pages too, those are a huge thing we use at GitLab on the landing pages on LinkedIn that you can kind of tie into your campaign as that landing link. So definitely, I mean, feel free also to connect with me after if you're interested in learning more about these things I'm talking very quickly about, because it's something that has been super helpful for us from an employer branding engagement and metrics perspective.
Lindsay, do you have any particular OKRs for your team?
They're more around, I think, kind of in the talent pipeline. I think that, we bring key performance metrics in around kind of the health of our recruiting efforts and our partnership with our managers. So something I always say for recruiters on our team is that you're helping to manage to the outcomes and manage the expectations of your stakeholders. And those are internal and external, your candidates and your hiring managers. So just educate them on what the landscape actually looks like for maybe a certain role and kind of boiling it down to that. Come with that data, come with that information. It can really drive what your efforts are. So what pool are you actually working with? What is that pool of potential candidates? And what is going to be your strategy to acquire based on that actual pool? So start with the reality, and it's not a one size fits all for every role and every location. So bring that to the table and craft your strategy from there. That would be my piece of advice around that.
Great. And we have 1 minute, and I'm gonna be really quick. I'm just gonna add my own anecdote. There's already a barrier of entry for what I'm gonna suggest. It's if you have LinkedIn Recruiter, which everyone here, if you have that, knows that that is absolutely a barrier of entry. But if you are lucky enough to have that tool at your disposal, they do a really good job. You can make different projects. Well, what I've done in the past is make different projects, add candidates to those projects, use different messages to candidates in those projects. And then, whenever there's a significant number of kind of responders or anything like that, basically like A/B testing those and seeing, what has the higher response rate based on messaging. And you can do that for a bunch of different roles. So that's also my 2 cents and how I've kind of figured out what works.
Excellent.
12:45.
Thank you to our panelists and moderator, and thank you all for coming. We have a lot more wonderful events